I'm the Midwest Program Coordinator at an organization called FracTracker Alliance. I'm based a little bit north of Ann Arbor, Michigan, if anyone's familiar with that. Huge lover of the Midwest. I'll probably never leave. And today I just wanted to talk to y'all a little bit about our work on data centers, but I'm also hoping that we can have a little bit of a conversation if folks are feeling willing to talk at the end about just generally how FracTracker can better support y'all's work in rural power. I know you've been getting a ton of data center information, so I'm going to try and keep this pretty brief. But if anyone has any questions at any point, feel free to stop me. Um, all right. So a little bit about FracTracker. We actually are an organization that primarily maps, analyzes, talks about the risks associated with fossil fuels. We do a lot of mapping of, physical infrastructure. So things like wells, things like compressor stations. And we have a lot of conversations about, who lives around this infrastructure. Um, we started as a project out of University of Pittsburgh in 2010. It was like a citizen science project, was my understanding. And then in 2012, the organization became a nonprofit. And we kind of find ourselves in between this like research organization and advocacy organization space where we're not all research, but we do a lot of providing technical expertise to other grassroots groups, other nonprofits, again, related to primarily fossil fuel data. Um, you know, Maps are not everything, but we find that visualization can be really helpful for folks. That analysis can be really helpful for a lot of grassroots groups. So we try and remain data-based, recognizing that, lived experiences is valid data. We try and create, tools that are interactive, and really collaborate with other nonprofits and grassroots groups. So we really consider ourselves in service of other groups. And I'll talk a little bit later about like what we can potentially offer. But I will just throw out there right off the bat. If you ever have a mapping or data need, definitely contact us. We might not know the answer, but we probably know someone who does. That's always what I tell folks. So we started working on data centers because we work really closely with a couple of grassroots groups, especially around the Pittsburgh area, since that's kind of where we got started. And those members um, alerted us to frac pads that had been, dead, sitting idle for, 5+ years, suddenly having, truck activity, folks on the site. And they said to us, we're hearing that this is going to be used to power data centers that are coming into the Pennsylvania area. And we'd like to start, having a little bit of a record of who's coming in and why. So we started combining a lot of media monitoring, some information that we FOIA'd, so, putting in public records requests, and crowdsourced information to start building out a public, open, and free map and database of these, hyperscale projects that are coming in. Like I mentioned, it's free, it's open to public use. I'll take you through how to get to that. If you want, there's a QR code. I'll pass these slides on to Kyle and folks at RPC afterwards so you can click through them. But we're gonna go through the tool together anyways. All right, so I'm gonna open this tool and switch my screen. Okay, there it goes. All right, so actually, when you pop into this, you will get this screen. I'll send this link to y'all, but this screen is really just all of the background information on our tool and the data. So the first thing that you're probably seeing that's exciting, if you see a data center in your community that's not on our map, you can click this Submit New Data data center button, and it will take you through a form that allows you to add in information that will be uploaded to our map. I won't go through this whole thing, but the other thing that I will point out is that you can see on the second line, the spreadsheet for the data center sites is available. It's a Google Doc, and you can download data straight from there if it's of interest. All right, so I'm going to click I agree to these terms, and here's our map. So I'm just going to walk y'all through a couple of the tools on the side here. This might be intuitive, but for other folks it's not, so I like to just spend a little bit of time walking through it. Obviously, we have this legend right here, and we're tracking projects that are, particularly these hyperscale ones that are coming in. Less so the, older data centers that I'm sure we all have heard enough of by now did not have the same environmental impact or human impact as these kind of large hyperscale data centers. So this is definitely more for those new proposals, but you will see a variety of statuses over on the left. Over here, I'm gonna bring y'all to the data center closest to me, because that's scary. That's this data center right here. It's an orange circle. If we go to the legend, we know that it is approved under construction. I'm hoping that even though it's been approved, some permitting might get in the way of this thing actually starting construction, but that's where I'm currently at with the one near me. Couple other layers that might be of interest to folks on this left side. So, we at FracTracker are really interested in power, and not only are these frac well pads, coming online, I'm sure that you have already heard from many speakers that a lot of the power plants that were planned for retirement are coming back online or staying online in service of these data centers. So, we have a couple layers here, power plants with retirement planned or ones that did already retire. Um, this right here happens to be a peaker plant that was retired, and I have already heard from folks in this county that there are talks to bring it back online, which is just, maybe of interest to folks. So as you probably saw, when I click open this data center, I have a ton of information, and this stuff on the left is information that we are collecting based on feedback that community groups and other nonprofits asked for. There's a little bit of information here on the actual address, the location, the status. If we scroll down, we can see that there has been community pushback, and there's in fact a Facebook group trying to keep this, community involved in this fight. If we scroll down, we get a little bit more details. The developer, there's the energy usage. This is going to be the max energy usage. They said that for this specific facility, it will start at 200 megawatt capacity and ramp up to 525. And I won't go through all of these right now, but you can see that we still have some blanks in the data. In this case, the project near me do not have an estimated cost for that project yet. There are no backup generators on the site plans quite yet that we were able to plug into this, and we don't know if there's a dedicated power plant online. At the end of this, you'll see some online documentation, and this is something that I think is particularly of interest to folks. In this bottom section, you will see mainly news media articles about the data center. So in this case, if I were to spend a little time going through these articles, I could see a little bit of a timeline of events. And typically, if there are any action items, so say a community group is planning a protest of some sort, we would include that also in the online documentation. Now, I will say that, this data center happens to be very close to my home. This is a very, very a fairly complete entry that we have for this facility. If we were to click over to another one, let's hit this one right here in Missouri, we can see that there's a lot less information. And that's just because of what's available. There's only been, two news articles about this. There's, community pushback, but maybe not a concerted group or a Facebook group that we could point folks to get involved in. And again, some of this information is filled out, but things like the tenant, we don't know who's going to use the data from that data center. So this is kind of the main portion of the tool. Something that might also be of interest for folks, let me just turn off these competing layers. We have here these filters. So say you wanted to only look at what facilities are hyperscale, we can just do that. Or if we want to see ones that are hyperscale and have community pushback, that's the number that we have. Um, I'm sharing this tool because one, I think it's really cool. I know I'm so biased, but I think the fact that folks can add information to data centers, correct us where we're wrong, give us some of that local knowledge that, we all can't be on the ground for every data center for. I think this is super helpful. Additionally, like I mentioned, the data is also free and available to the public. So we've already had groups that are, taking the data center locations and doing things like demographic analyses on who lives around these facilities. Um, I'm sharing this with y'all, but I do feel like I need to give this group a heads up. This tool is about to change, hopefully for the better. And I'll talk about some of those changes in just a little bit. Let me click back over to my presentation. Okie dokie. All right, so based on conversations that I've had with folks on this group, I wanted to talk about some of the more recent changes that we've made and what we're making coming forward. So I, spoke with Kyle prior to being invited to this group just about, what was going on the ground. And we both agreed that it would be really helpful to have some idea of, what electric service companies are, what utilities are essentially serving each of these data centers. And we were able to add to the map HIFLD, that's Department of Homeland Security, has a database. They have an archived electric retail service area. So including that into the map made things a little bit easier for folks to explore and kind of see, okay, this data center that's in my community, it's Project Lion. I see that it is within DTE's, that's our utility, within their service area, and I can expect that they will probably be providing power or infrastructure in some way to this data center. Now, unfortunately, that data layer is not super useful at the neighborhood layer. There's a lot of overlap between utility service areas, and as I'm sure, folks here maybe know even more than I, some more, rural electric providers tend to not make that data available. So we are going state by state to try and find electric retail service areas that really speak to the data center proposals themselves. I don't know if Ishana is on this call, but I met with Ishana at one point who mentioned that it would be really helpful to have, some sort of note on if there have been issues with transparency around data centers. So our team kind of put our heads together and we said, well, the biggest and most glaring issues around transparency with data centers is township officials signing NDAs that they really haven't been approached with before. So now we've added in a new field for folks to note, hey, has my community, you know, have they dealt with NDAs being signed by township officials? as just kind of a measure of transparency. This still needs to be significantly populated, as many of our fields do. We have folks working full time on this, and I'm sure I don't have to talk to y'all. But we can't keep up even with multiple staff members trying to keep track of all of these projects that are being proposed. So really doing our best to kind of inform folks, but um, definitely, as is the case with a lot of data center work, finding ourselves, not quite as ahead of the curve as we would have liked to be. We're also getting better information on those community groups. So for a while, we just had, is there community pushback? Now we're really pointing folks towards where they can find that pushback, where they can get involved. Interestingly, it really is a lot of Facebook groups that we've been seeing, but we've also seen, grassroots groups kind of expand. A data center on the other side of me that was able to be canceled, that group of community members actually started forming their own nonprofit to ensure, better development of their county going forward. Um, like I mentioned, we're having a second version of this tool come up soon. I really hope that it's going to be a little bit clearer and easier for folks to navigate, but we're really, really hoping to highlight more wins because I think it's really important to highlight the wins right now. A lot of folks are feeling kind of the weightiness of this data center fight in a way that can be really jarring. Highlighting those wins not only allows us to, kind of talk about what strategies they used that worked, but also allows us to, I don't know, just keep some of that joy, which I think is really needed right now. Okay, so a couple other resources I wanted to flag for y'all. Again, things are linked here, so I'll send this out afterwards so y'all can access it. But if folks weren't already aware and are needing resources or repositories related to data centers, I wanted to point out two that are kind of forming or have formed at this point. The first is Halt the Harm Network. It's an advocacy network that was primarily focused on fighting oil and gas, and it's been a partner of FracTrackers for a while. But they have recently launched their Stop the Bad Data Centers website. And I really, really, really cannot highlight enough what great work that they're doing, ingesting many, many, many different resources and then providing those out to a variety of community advocates. This is an advocacy network that has been, working really effectively for years. And so they're kind of adding the data centers into their repertoire. Um, I've linked here, and like I said, I'll send out. You can sign up for their network, and also, they have something within that network called like the Leader Network. Signing up for that, requires you to provide a little bit more information just on the work that you do, but it gives you access to some, networking. Sorry, networking is not the right word. Some discussion groups about data centers and data center strategy that might be even earlier, sorry, provided earlier to these leaders before the Stop the Bad Data Centers website as a whole. Um, the other one I wanted to mention, which I'm admittedly less familiar with, is this data centers advocacy hubs. It's designed for these individual memberships, but really, as long as you're aligned with their mission of reducing greenhouse gas emissions from data centers, lifting up local sustainability and affordability impacts, and ensuring that data centers approved are powered by clean energy. As long as you are working towards that, you can also join this network, and it has, again, a wealth of resources and information. I do believe, again, I haven't spent a ton of time on the Data Center Advocacy Hub. I do believe that some of the resources on Halt the Harm are on the Data Center Advocacy Hub and vice versa. So there might be a little bit of redundancy there, but I'm really trying to get folks involved and connected as best they can during this. Uh, Okay, I'm seeing a question in the chat. Can you say a little bit more about how nonprofits and local organizing groups are using the data to help their campaigns? Yeah, so a lot of the data center maps that y'all are probably used to looking at, I'm thinking of datacenter.com or datacentermap.com. Those are, technically not able, how do I say this? You're not supposed to scrape the data from them. Technically, in their terms and conditions, that is not free and public data. So what folks are doing with ours is, having a more accurate count of where the hyperscale facilities are, kind of ignoring or being able to put aside the older data centers that, again, are not contributing to the environmental degradation in the way that these hyperscale facilities are. And oftentimes they're bringing this information to their township officials, or certain research groups are, taking the data center locations, looking at the demographics around it, or looking at where it is in relationship to their water sources or cultural points of interest, parks, schools, things in their neighborhood that they're concerned about. They're able to just kind of use this data. Additionally, there is kind of that slightly live aspect of it of, if you're looking through the documentation and you're looking through the kind of series of events in those media monitoring, you can kind of follow a path. Okay, I see that this data center was proposed, and oh, I see that they managed to escape state permitting, and oh, you kind of get this really nice complete picture of a data center, which for folks maybe joining in, late to the fight, helps give that really helpful context. Um, so for the groups we're in contact, oh, sorry, the second question is, for the groups you're in contact with, are they primarily trying to stop the build out of data centers or also organizing to secure community benefits? It's both. I will say that, a lot of the community benefits agreements that communities that I work with have been approached with are just lacking. They're not necessarily like too how do I say this? Mm, the protections are just not super protective. The benefits aren't enough that they want to justify these data centers coming in. But there are a good amount of groups, doing both, trying to stop the build out of data center and just getting slightly better community benefits. And I'll add that in both of these resources in Halt the Harm Network and Data Centers Advocacy Hub, they have many examples of community benefits agreements. Maybe not many because there haven't been a ton around data centers, but they do have some examples of good ones and bad ones that might be of interest to just kind of click through. All right, so that's kind of it for my presentation. I had these questions that I really wanted to kind of ask y'all, but I understand if folks are not necessarily wanting to discuss. I'll just kind of list them out really quick, and maybe if folks have any thoughts, we can just organically discuss it. I'm sorry, it was a hard act to follow. Jim Lazar from 2 weeks ago, it was so information heavy, and my normal energy presentation on data centers focuses around investor-owned utilities, which I think is way less relevant here. But what I really wanted to ask and kind of discuss with y'all is, how we might be able to better support, smaller rural cooperatives with, better data related to both the data centers, but also just, power generally. Curious to hear, if folks who are working with co-ops are being approached with data centers since they have such a huge capacity need. And curious to hear from y'all, just how that fight might be a little bit different between electric co-ops and like investor-owned utilities. So I'll kind of pause there and see if anyone has any thoughts, not to put pressure on y'all.
Gwen, while folks are thinking, just thank you so much. And no, we can't drink from the Jim Lazar fire hose every week. So this is a much needed, not change of pace per se. That's to imply that you're slow, and that's not at all. But a change of style or venue is nice.
I can tell you that our G&E for co-ops has been approached and is actively considering about data centers. I asked them what they were thinking about, and this is Dairyland in Wisconsin. I asked them what they were thinking about and what they were thinking about how they would move forward with ratepayer protections, and they stopped talking to us. So uh, that's the best I can tell you. That it's definitely out there in the water for our RACs.
Thank you. Other questions, comments for Gwen?
That's okay. I definitely figured I was taking a risk in the afternoon on a Wednesday. I figured folks might be a little bit not feeling like talking, but I mean that's just so crazy to hear about that, as soon as you brought up ratepayer protections, which is something that I think, co-ops are known to have better than investor-owned utilities, maybe they just went silent. That also just seems to be par for the course, in my experience with the data centers, that there's a lot of, yeah, just silence from folks, not really wanting to answer, the hard questions of who is going to pay for this? How do we, have these companies actually bring their own power? Is that even feasible? Does that mean, we're just going to build a lot more on-site power generation? Just a bummer when they stop talking. Dang.
I do have one other thought that you just spurred in me that might be a useful thing, which is just germane examples of legislation in different areas. So that would be bill tracking, yes, but also it would be really nice to see exemplary bills. And I think that was mentioned that maybe other groups have that, but what territories certain bills might be affecting would be very cool to see.
Heard, yeah. It's a little bit harder to track, but I will mention that, again, Halt the Harm, this Stop the Bad data centers, which let me see if I can pull this up in a reasonable amount of time in front of y'all. They have just released a policy tracker that I have found a little bit helpful. Let's see. Screen. Give it a second. Okay, so this is that Stop the Bad Data Centers website, that I think you all are seeing now. I'll definitely make sure that this gets sent out in case it's of interest. The policy tracker is up here, and it's in its infancy because, a lot of the legislation is slow moving. But again, a good amount of information and filtering that you can do here to see, all right, what's dying in committee, what is not getting passed, and kind of an easy summary breakdown to the right. While we're also on here, I'll just click over to this resources section. Give it 1 second. So again, this is like a huge, huge, huge long list that you can filter down if you're looking for any sort of specific information or, state specific information. And in addition, if y'all are creating any resources on the issue, you can use the submit a resource button and, put it in there, which I think is really valuable as we have, a lot of similar fights going on, despite, the fact that we're all in different geographies or maybe dealing with, different levels of electric generation. This is just super helpful, I think, to page through. I see something in the chat. Give me a sec. Yeah, I can absolutely share this link. Do-do-do. All right. Let me know if that does not work for you in the chat. And I will also just link the regular Halt the Harm if y'all are interested in this space. Like I said, it's an advocacy space mainly about oil and gas. Let me do a quick login here so y'all can see. Um, Lot of resources, lot of just sharing of what's going on in folks specific orgs, if there's any calls to action, kind of putting it out to this network. This network is not just for nonprofits. I'll mention that I think the Data Center Advocacy Hub, again, I'm less familiar with that one. I'll link that one as well in just a moment. That one is meant more for nonprofits, grassroots groups. This network, really anyone can join. So you have a large audience in this space of, folks really committed to, curbing fossil fuel use. Um, I'll add that, many different types of events are hosted on Halt the Harm Network that may be of interest or may not. And there's also, spaces and how do I say this? Commenting spaces. I mean, this is what I mean. It's a bulletin board, and you can see here, if someone is asking for something, um, and folks are able to comment on that further. So there's been a lot of discussion, especially just given all of the data centers work that they're doing. You can see here, here's an invite to a data center specific event. Um, but also, I'm trying to find y'all something that isn't data center related. Here we go. So this was a public health conference that was held in Pittsburgh, but Halt the Harm also recorded the entire thing and made it available to the public. So that was an event that folks could potentially attend. All right,
Sorry, Gwen, could I just make sure I understood something correctly? For the policy tracker, is that crowdsourced? In other words, like it just is really dependent on folks uploading what's going on rather than like having someone monitor state by state different pieces.
The policy tracker is not crowdsourced. That is being done by a research fellow who's tearing through that information. But the regular resource space, that's where you can submit like a new resource. However, the folks at Halt the Harm are really, really receptive. So if you're going through the tracker, and you're like, oh my gosh, they're missing something in my state that I know is, going on. You can send them an email or, contact them on the website, and they will get that uploaded very quickly. There have been a couple times where I've flagged things that they didn't have, and within a couple hours, it was on the website, had been evaluated by their fellow.
Amazing. Thank you.
Hey, this is Aaron with Shareable. My camera's not working, otherwise I turn it on. I think that's amazing that the policy tracker is actually like kind of curated. That's very cool. I just wanted to say that, and then also, I was the one who put the question about how groups might be using your resources and your data, and I'm wondering if you have any, like, this might not be the scope of your organization, but it's like, do you have any kind of like anecdotes or like have you heard from anyone that like, oh, this was really useful in connecting me to another group, or oh, this was really useful in showing XYZ so that a politician, like a local elected, took this seriously? I'm wondering if like any use cases like that have emerged, or if it's like maybe too early in the game for that.
Yeah, there's definitely been a little bit of that kind of first thing that you mentioned. Groups from one data center fight connecting with groups from another data center fight to go, what happened, what went well. As far as this data center, the data center map or data being in front of legislators right yet, I don't think that has happened beyond like a very how do I say this? Like local scale. I know folks have taken it to again like township officials, but not necessarily at this point. I haven't heard of anyone doing, legislators beyond like a county level. Um, I will also add some of FracTracker's work and why I wanted to talk to y'all and what I wanted to offer is just we do a lot of one-off maps, static maps, or maybe interactive maps where we do the work for you on, calculating the demographics around a given facility or seeing if there's any environmental justice concerns. In our Tracker 2.0, there will be environmental justice data included, so we're hoping that that kind of facilitates, folks taking the data to their legislators. Um, but I think we're a couple weeks away from that. I think at least two. Um, and I maybe didn't do the greatest job of explaining this, but what I offered, Kyle and Ashana and what I offer everyone is again, if you have a data and mapping need, if it's related to oil and gas or if it's not, reach out, ask us. We take on a lot of projects that are not, super directly tied to oil and gas. For instance, I've done some mapping on things like CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations in Minnesota for a partner who, just needed a little bit of help or capacity getting that done. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my spiel, my offer to y'all. If you ever have a question there, please reach out.